Great. Welcome, everyone. As you're joining, I'm Kristen Daly from Global Washington. We're going to wait a minute or so. I know we have people just joining now. Come more. Welcome. You're in the right place here for the Global Washington event. Great. And as you're joining, we'd love for you all in the audience to type in your name and affiliation in the chat. It's always nice to see who's on the event and connect with others. Great. Okay, and let's see. And Pratima, I just want to double check that everyone can add their name.
Bring it back. I was going to close it when I saw the thing. I close it.
Okay. Well, why don't we get started? I know others will be joining, but I wanted to welcome you and get into our content. Thank you all for joining. I'm Kristen Daly from Global Washington. If you don't know, Global Washington is a network of organizations that have a presence in Washington State and do work in low and middle income countries to improve lives. And the way we organize our work is we pick a different issue every month and dive in deep around that issue. And the issues, we use the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. And so this month, we're looking at quality education for all of our members. And if you're on our email list, you should have seen this morning, we sent out an issue brief and 2 profile articles that you all can read that really talks about the issue we're going to talk about today as well, and how originally the Millennium Development Goals set out access to education and numbers and targets to get children into schools. And we've evolved since then, and the development community has really realized that it's not just access to education, but that we really need to look at quality education and how we give agency to children in particular, but people around the world, so that they can live their full potential, so that the communities come together and that economies can thrive. So I'm really excited to spotlight 4 of our member organizations here today. The format for today is Mej is going to moderate a facilitated conversation, and then we'll have time at the end for Q&A from all of you. If you see at the bottom of your screen, there's a little tab that says Q&A. And when we get to that section in about 45 minutes, I believe, we want you to type in your question there, and then Mej will read that question verbally aloud to the panelists for them to answer. So you can start thinking of your questions. Before then, though, we encourage all of you to use the chat to make comments on whatever's being said, to connect with each other, or just type in, oh, that's a great thought. I love that example. However you want to interact, you can use the chat to make this all more lively. So with that, I'm going to do just brief introductions of the speakers. I encourage you to continue to learn more about their organizations and learn more about them. So first, I want to introduce Laura Baerwolf, who is the Director of Operations at the Mona Foundation. She's been at the foundation for the past 3 years, and her previous positions include work for nonprofit organizations and major educational institutes. Her passion also includes supporting individuals in healthcare and community and development, which includes her past positions. And she has a deep commitment to service and also gender equality. Next, I want to introduce Alice Lamunu, who is the founder and executive director of Voices of Children's Faith in Northern Uganda. And Alice was born and raised in Acholi, the Acholi tribe of northern Uganda, where she experienced herself living in poverty. Then she moved to the United States in 1996 and became a successful businesswoman in the childcare industry. And because of her connections and because of her strong roots, she's decided to start funding educational scholarships back in her hometown in 2010. And this started reaching 40 girls to go to boarding school, and then led to this fantastic nonprofit that she founded that you'll hear more about in a moment. Next, I want to introduce Shoshon Tama-Sweet, who's the Director of International Programs and Transition Partners at Alliance for Children Everywhere. Shoshon has worked in a number of countries around the world, in particular in Africa, and his work has included humanitarian relief, refugee support, healthcare, child and maternal health, microfinance, and child protection. His past work also includes supporting government-funded programs and work in particular with the UN agencies such as UNHCR, UNICEF, and UNFPA. Lastly, I want to introduce your moderator for today, Mej Bendoui, who is a Senior Associate Director at APCO Worldwide. She specializes in the intersection between social impact and social justice. Prior to APCO, Mej worked at Zillow, building out their DE&I strategy and working at Starbucks on their bold commitment to the refugee hiring initiative. Mej speaks Arabic, English, and French, and I'm proud to say that she's been part of Global Washington for the past several years and on our planning committee for our Global Washington conference. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mej to kick off our conversation.
Thank you, Kristen. And in fact, I was an intern when Global Washington first started. So it's been a very long time. Thanks so much for the introductions. And thank you to our panelists for being here. Super thrilled to have this conversation with you all. And I know everyone is excited to hear from you. So I'll kick us off with the first question. Maybe Laura, you're on my screen. You're the first on my screen. So maybe I'll ask, it's directed at all of you, but we'll start with you. Can you tell us, how does the Mona Foundation define quality education?
Sure, it's such a great question. And I'm so happy to be here with all of you. And thank you to Global Washington for organizing the event and inviting us all here for this important discussion. Maybe just most succinctly, I could say that, at Mona Foundation, we define quality education as empowering students to realize their full humanity. And this means empowering students with the knowledge, the qualities and skills that they need to improve their life outcomes, as well as to contribute to the social good. So to pursue their own dreams and aspirations, but to consider these in light of how they can make a difference in the life of their family and their neighbors and their community and so on. We know that education is a powerful driver of development, and the World Bank talks about it as one of the strongest instruments for reducing poverty and improving health, gender equality, peace, and stability. It has broad implications. So when we think about defining what quality education is, we have to think of it in terms of these outcomes. What is the quality of education that will drive these outcomes? And so the question there really becomes like, well, so then what quality of education builds capacity in people towards this outcome, right? What does this look like? So we could think first of all about, well, just the quality of education, of course, would have to build competency and understanding in terms of academics for the students as they progress from grade to grade. Unfortunately, a large proportion of children in school right now are not actually acquiring the fundamental skills. The World Bank has, in this concept of learning poverty, identified that somewhere between 53 and 80% of children in low and middle income countries cannot read or understand a simple text by the time they finish primary school. So certainly that is a huge issue when it comes to thinking about quality education. It also points to the importance of training, the importance of teacher training, right, which is one of Mona's program's components. quality education also has to include not only academics and the arts, though. We see that it really needs to also teach lessons of equality, of ethics and service alongside academics. When these are all combined, when you have academics and character development and service combined, then education creates and raises up very capable, very altruistic, very ethical young people who are able not only to improve their own lives, but are also very eager to become a source of social good, helping better their families and communities. But that type of positive social change, which we're seeing is, that's quality education, requires education to support students to develop their moral capabilities and to integrate service to others as a way of life. So quality education is far more than academics. We need to look at it in terms of very holistic ways. And I think we're seeing Mona's grassroots partners leading this transformation in a number of ways.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. And we also, if we learned anything, is that the past couple of years have altered things drastically. Alice, can you tell us, how does your organization define quality education? And you're on mute. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here with Global Washington and seeing you guys' faces. Yes, my organization can define quality education. A quality education is one that focuses on the whole child, the social, emotion, mental, physical, and cognitive development of each child, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, or geographic location. A quality education is supported by 3 key pillars: ensuring access to quality teacher, providing use of quality learning tools and professional development, and the establishment of safe and supportive quality learning environments. As you are aware that I was born in Uganda, raised in Uganda, we still have a very, very poor quality education in rural community in northern Uganda. You find school in that community, kids cannot finish even 5th grade. A lot of children drop out from school. Why? Because of lack of quality education and due to poverty in the community. When you are poor, you cannot support your family. And mostly back home in Uganda, you have at least to have money, source of income, so you will be able to put your kid in private school. That one, your child is going to gain quality education because they've got quality teacher. So these poor children coming from poor community, they're not able to achieve that goal to be in that private school. So how can we address this issue? To support this poor family, poor community, poor children. As I'm talking right now, 3 days ago, we had heavy rain. The local school in that very poor community where I came from collapsed. It's down to heart. So right now I need to raise money to build it. They just send me the picture. In that school, we not even let the kid go anywhere. How can we help this community? So poor quality, the children have no hope. But good education comes from quality environment.
Yeah.
Poor environment, children have no hope, no future for them. Because they cannot go to any school. That school has to be within the local community, the poor community. Because I witnessed it, and it's still happening after now. So we all have to address the issue, how can we make this poverty community, the children can achieve better education and see the light in their future.
Yeah. Alice, I love that. And I love that you touched on the issue of access, right? Like who has access to quality education. It's when you go to private school and not everyone obviously has access to that. Shoshon, I'm curious how ACE defines quality education. And you're on mute also. We're 2 years into the pandemic, but we're still doing this.
What can we do? Yeah, I think for us, we really look at outcomes from education and really outcomes on the life path of the child. And there's basically two pieces there. One, are we changing the life trajectory of the child in terms of the outcome that they can expect? You know, is it that they're going to continue to live in a rural area and be in subsistence agriculture? Are they going to be able to have, you know, a more skilled job in terms of a vocation? Are they going to be able to have higher education, whether that's progressing from primary to secondary or even on to post-secondary school? So, you know, what's that life trajectory that they're on? And are we changing that trajectory? And then secondly, are we advancing them along that trajectory in a particular way? And I really agree with Alice that, you know, basic access to a functional school is the minimum. And there's this tension between, you know, are we bringing people up to kind of a minimum location, or are we pushing the ceiling and really elevating the upper echelon of opportunity? And there's a real tension there because we have limited resources. And are you going to invest, you know, for example, in students who have the opportunity to go to university at, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 a year? Are you going to invest in primary school education and ensure that young children have basic literacy and numeracy? They can read, they can write, they can do basic math, and have the skills to function in their life. And I think just want to acknowledge that there's tension in those things and there's trade-offs. And because the need is so great, even a well-financed organization is not going to be able to meet all of those needs. I think the other thing that we really like to distinguish between is between credentialing, which is basically the piece of paper that acknowledges that you have a certain level of education and gives you permission to a certain level of job, versus the skills and the attributes that young people need to succeed. And I think those are not just professional skills, but they're also life skills and attitudes and habits of personality and behavior that, you know, are demonstrated to help children succeed. And for me, one of the real, again, tensions there is agency and empowerment of children. And frequently, you know, when you're trying to just get basic education to be functional, you're looking at rote memorization, you're hewing very strictly to a curriculum, you're really focused on your pass rates for children. And so children are not given the opportunity to be self-responsible and to be self-reliant. And yet we know that because there's so few formal job opportunities, there's so few slots for university, there's even so few children who progress from primary to secondary, that those other personality attributes, you know, call it grit or whatever you want, are really important for success. And so there's, you know, how do we have successful academic education, but ensure that there's actual life skills? And in the areas that we work in Lusaka, Zambia, which are the poorest neighborhoods, you know, I hate to use the word slums, but they're the slums of Lusaka. We know that most children are not going to get formal employment, and they have to have the life skills and the personality traits to succeed and survive in a very difficult, you know, work environment and family environment. And so we need to combine that with, you know, a focus on academic excellence and performance. So
I love that. And if I'm hearing anything from the three of you is, you know, you all talk about what is the environment, both from the quality of teachers, to access, and poverty, obviously that's environment, also trajectory, like quality means how are children, youth being set up for success, right? Or not. Thank you for sharing that. Shoshon, while you have the mic, I have a specific question to you. If you can tell us how ACE's educational programs cater to some of the challenges that adolescent girls face, and then what are some unique challenges and strengths of implementing such program in a country like Zambia?
Yeah, I mean, I think access and equal access for girls and young women is an imperative. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient to get parity of outcomes. And that's because of the day-to-day living conditions and responsibilities that young girls and adolescent girls have, whether that's household work, whether that's chores at home, whether that's childcare for younger siblings, and whether that's also the pressures that young girls face in an educational institute, and particularly in government schools. There's a sad but very well documented propensity for adolescent girls to face abuse or coercion or sexual harassment, even within the education system, within the schools. And so we have to recognize that adolescent girls have different needs. Adolescent sexual reproductive health, I think, is something that's absolutely essential for schools to be able to talk about and to discuss. As much as we want to ignore it, we can't deny the fact that there is sexual behavior among teenagers in schools. And the real imbalance there is that oftentimes schools will, kick a girl out if she becomes pregnant. You rarely hear, I don't think I've ever heard of a teenage boy being kicked out of school because he got a girl pregnant or engaged in sexual activity. And so one of the things that we do very practically with our secondary school in Lusaka is, if a girl gets pregnant, which we do not want to happen, but she remains in school and she can bring her child to school and she can breastfeed the child there and have a safe space to be a student, to be a young woman who's trying to improve her education and maintain that life trajectory. And yet we acknowledge the fact that she's also a young mother and that she has a baby. So for me, this issue of adolescent sexual reproductive health really is something that schools at least need to be having an eyes wide open conversation about, and to be including some kind of curriculum around those issues with both boys and girls. And as global youth culture, from Facebook to TikTok explodes with the advent of cell phones, and this is no different than the US high school system, right? And all the same kinds of issues. But I think that there is less awareness and openness to the need to discuss some of those difficult issues in some of the communities that we work on. It's either considered not a school issue or something that really can't be spoken about. So to me, that's just a really important way to expand our idea of what education means, because the negative impacts of that on a young woman's life are, can be dramatically negative. And so it's really worth addressing to get ahead of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for providing that. Alice, if we all know anything, is that the pandemic has changed all of us. We've all experienced challenges. And we've all gone through that at the same time globally. But I'm curious to know what unique challenges and needs that girls in northern Uganda experience since the pandemic. And you're on mute. Oh, Alice, you're still on mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Ooh, yeah, big challenge in northern Uganda, the teenagers, pregnancy. In the northern Uganda, this pandemic really hits girls in an incredibly unique way. While it is true that everyone has struggled with the fallout of this global pandemic, it has had more serious consequences on some of the most vulnerable populations. Unfortunately, Adolescent girls have been among the most adversely affected, and for some, life has become nightmare. Pregnancy, teenage pregnancy, and early marriage. It has been the most increase for these vulnerable girls. In Gulu, where I came from, Noya, as with many other districts in Uganda, COVID-19 has resulted in an increased rate of teenage pregnancy in order to gain basic necessity like sanitary pads. Girls have engaged in transactional sex with men who takes advantage of their need for money. Having been impregnated, this has not only ruined my future, but also the trust that my parents had in me, says Atim Florence, who is facing a pregnancy at just the age of 12 years old. Now she finds herself out of school and afraid for our future. Atim Florence is not alone in Amoro, Noya. Amoro and Kirgum district, that's also our neighboring district, close to where VOCFINU operate. There have been more than 1,943 teenage pregnancies during the 2 years lockdown. Heading to the burden, many girls are left without a partner and find themselves having to be the breadwinners of their families. So this a team, the Florence, so only 12 years old.
Wow.
And the parents just send to go and sell local things like food, you know, to survive. One second.
No problem. Take your time. That's pretty powerful, though, what Alice was just saying.
So 1 second.
No problem.
So these girls was raped, that team.
Hmm.
And this girl became pregnant. Instead of arresting this man, the family had to settle the issue and been given some money. Is a traditional thing, a cultural things, okay? And being a woman, like we as ladies, as young girl at the age of 12, being raped and you settle the issue, no. The men have to be punished.
Mhm.
It's true, it's very painful. I have the instance where in my organization, I have a lot of child mothers. I have a 13 years, the girl who had pregnant became pregnant at the age of 13 years old. And this year in January, she came to me with a baby. It was 3 months, well, I was in Uganda. Okay, I came back January 22nd, and I'm going back July. The girl told me she has never been in school because their parents are poor. 3 months old baby. She's now 14. So she joined my team, the organization. So we give her vocational skill training in bakery and tailoring, and I provide everything for her, including our child, medical treatment.
Mhm.
Why? I'm a woman. I'm a mother, I have 4 children. And you see the child like that. She's a child, she cannot support herself and she cannot support her baby. It's very challenging. So I really pray God, what is happening with the poor community, because this is also deal of the poverty. Nothing much is poverty. Because when a child comes from a good family, this child can give birth. They will put this child back to a good private school. That child will continue with our education. But a child who came from a poor family, cannot support themselves and cannot support the children. So the only hope for them is either get opportunity with these old men, have sex and get them, provide them money to support themselves. It's very painful and disappointing for any parent, whether you're a man, you have a daughter, and you see your daughter going through that challenge. Nobody wants that. When you have a child, you pray God that this kid should achieve their goal, if there's any possibility. If they cannot go to university, okay, vocational skill training, provide for them. Yes, I'm doing for this local community. And it's a challenge. I need to join the hand with many people who can want to partner with us and try to work with this community.
Yeah.
How can we address the issue? How can we leave this kid, this girl from where they are? And what I'm doing right now, a kid who at least they join school a little bit, I put them from that local community in that school. I pick them in, I put it in private school, boarding school. It's expensive, but why? I want this girl to see the light on her face. And that's what I'm doing. For those who cannot start read, we are working with local community. We mentor them. We give them counseling that they can do something. If they feel they cannot study, we give them vocational skill. Whatever you want to do, try. If you can do it, that's better. So that they can have the hope for their future. They can do something. They can, being with a training skill, you are able to do something a little bit and sell. As a woman, you don't go to sell yourself or become a prostitute so you can make money. No. So the big challenge we have in northern Uganda, the incidence of early childhood marriage is also on the rise as poverty caused by the pandemic, as forced families to marry off their daughters to help alleviate financial burdens. In Gulu, where I came from, and where district alone, at least 166 school-age girls have been married out of, according to police reports in the 2 districts, and the numbers are expected to be higher as many cases remain unreported by the local authorities. So the early marriage, once again, early marriage is a big challenge, that because also the mothers family are very poor. So if my son, the man come want to marry my kid, okay, go, and I get some money from that.
Yeah. That's heartbreaking. And to be honest, as a new parent, this hits home. It's just, I can't even begin to imagine. These are very unique challenges. Thank you so much, Alice, for sharing. It's hard to be doing the work you're doing. Laura, my next question is for you. Can you tell us a bit more about EdTech and how you've seen your educational partners incorporate it in the past few years?
Sure. Maybe just before getting to that question, just want to appreciate the comments both from Shoshon and Alice. The importance of looking at life outcomes of the students is key. And I would add that in addition to the life outcomes of the students, there's also the societal outcomes of the impact that those students have in the life of their families and communities. And so clearly education to be transformational, we need to be looking at those outcomes and working towards the change that we're hoping to advance. And as both the comments related to girls' education, it's such a heartbreaking situation, Alice, that you're describing. And we know that this is the plight of girls in many, many, many places around the world. We just visited, a team from Mona just went to Guatemala to visit an area of Guatemala in a school, the My Impact School, which is one of our newest partners, to learn about the experience there, where they are addressing the education and empowerment of girls in an Indigenous-led school. The teachers are the administrators, the leadership team are Indigenous Maya women The teachers are as well, and it's serving Indigenous Maya girls who are among the most marginalized population in the Western Hemisphere. And it was so enlightening. Well, one, interesting to hear the experience of these girls, very similar to what you're sharing, the lack of opportunity, the culture socially seeing them as really having no purpose other than to have babies, and to take care of the house. And for the girls themselves to go from that stage, that way of being or that way of thinking of themselves through an educational process to not only gain the academic knowledge and skills, but to begin to see themselves as worthy, as being autonomous, equal human beings, worthy of respect, able to explore their own aspirations and desires and then work towards those. As hard, it gives me hope, that we have a serious condition as far as the plight of many girls in this world, but there is also hope because we see in their program, for example, and in the experience of other partners that Mona has around the world, that when education can address more holistically the life of the girl, as you're trying, describing also, Alice, it can't just be about going to school and sitting in a classroom. There's so much more to that girl's life that needs to be addressed. And it was so interesting in this particular school to see how they look at not only the academics, but culture and identity, the social emotional development of the girl, and family engagement. So they also had significant work that they were doing in terms of engaging the parents and the brothers in these conversations around equality and the importance of girls' education and what that looks like. So just wanted to connect on those couple of points. As far as ed tech, what I failed to mention maybe in my earlier answer is that access to digital technology is really something that we are seeing as being so essential these days to quality education. The pandemic certainly has awakened the world to the reality that access to digital technology is really a basic human right. It's not just something that's nice to have, it's actually a requirement in order to build the connections and gain the knowledge and understanding and make use of the tools and to expand access to education in ways that we really haven't dreamed of until the pandemic kind of forced us to consider it. The COVID pointed out this vast digital divide that exists between and within populations. We've seen it in the United States as well, and of course around the world, and the impact that a lack of access to technology has on educational opportunity. In Mona's experience, the pandemic also pointed to the great potential that technology has to improve both the quality and the reach of education for both teachers and learners. One of our partners, Dr. Urvashi Sani with Study Hall Educational Foundation in India, said that perhaps the greatest learning from this crisis, the pandemic, has been the realization that technology is a great tool that we have not leveraged enough. We must empower our teachers to reinvent their roles from that of transferring information to enabling learning through diverse high-tech and low-tech sources. So really to take advantage of all the tools that we have available to us. And it's quite striking actually that she says technology is a tool that we have not leveraged enough because actually her organization, Study Hall Educational Foundation, has had actually some considerable experience, maybe fairly visionary, in terms of how technology can advance the quality and scope of educational reach. Ed tech, just maybe to back up a little bit for those who aren't familiar with this term, it's really just about using hardware, software, digital content, data, information systems in education to support and enrich teaching and learning, to improve the delivery of education. So it addresses both quality and access. So as an example from Study Hall Educational Foundation, one of the initiatives that Mona supports in our partnership with them is called Digital Study Hall. And this goes back to 2005. So that's what I'm saying. They were kind of visionary in their approach here. So 2005, and Study Hall, or CHEF for short, envisioned improving the quality of education in India's slum and rural schools. And the concept was to use simple video technology and to video teachers in the best schools, the most well-trained, giving lessons, and then to provide those videotaped lessons with those that are in the rural schools that don't have those types of resources, right? So in collaboration with Microsoft Research India and Princeton University professor Randy Wang, CHEF began this new initiative they called Digital Study Hall. They created these videos of live classroom sessions taught by the best qualified teachers. They provided them free of charge to the teachers and students in poor rural schools, and the quality of education of these students, the ability of the teachers to provide quality education because they themselves were receiving training, all of it improved. And the videos were not the sole piece of it. It was also reinforced with ongoing teacher trainings so that the teachers could really adopt these best practices. When Mona began supporting Digital Study Hall just a few years later, they had just a small collection of videos and were serving a small group of about 23 government schools in one state. And by about 5 years later, it had grown to serve nearly 800 schools. They now had over 1,000 high quality video lessons, and now they were uploading them to YouTube to give greater access, to anyone who wanted access to them. And by 2019, they had over 2,000 videos, almost 90,000 subscribers on YouTube to their DSH online channel. So then when the pandemic hit in May 2020, India went into lockdown, quickly closed all the schools, of course, like it's a story everywhere. And so the students had no other way to continue learning, and both teachers and students from not only just the one state where CHEF is located, but now 4 Indian states, as well as Nepal and Bhutan, flocked to the DSH platform for online education for the students. And they that year grew to over 2 million unique users. So it's really been an incredible story. And even if it just ended there, it would be an incredible story, right? As far as access to quality education and quality teaching goes. But they've adapted it even further and had previously started a program of one-room schools to allow out-of-school children to come to these one-room schools and help them learn so they could get up to grade level and transition to public schools. Well, again, during COVID, that became even more applicable because now all the children were out of school, right? And they adapted their already strong connection to digital technology and this vast library they had of resources to now connect it to this program of one-room schools out in the rural areas, and trained some of their graduates and gave them access to just cell phones, to laptops that they could then take out and then use these lessons to provide a continuing education to students. So it's really remarkable. And it's just one story. I could go on and on. But I will stop.
No, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, Laura. And that's absolutely incredible. Like the power of technology. And again, like I keep hearing all of you say access to technology, or access to, it's all intertwined and connected. Thank you for sharing that. And before we open it up to for Q&A, I'd love to hear, excuse me, from you all, what your outlook on the future is, and if you're optimistic for the future education. Who wants to take it? Shoshon.
In the long term, long term, I'm very optimistic. But
that's good.
I would definitely echo Alice's comments that the pandemic has been, a huge setback, especially for poorer girls, rural girls, and adolescent girls. in Southern Africa. I know this is true in contacts in the Horn of Africa. I know this is true. And I think these secondary impacts of first COVID and now commodity issues around fertilizer and oil are just having a devastating effects on economies in Southern Africa. Tourism has essentially disappeared. So that's a huge driver that's gone. You know, the cost of diesel and fuel has more than doubled. Fertilizer has gone up multiples. And as schools closed, a huge number of adolescent girls returned home and either entered into early marriage or just had their flow of education disrupted. It's very hard to then return to school after 6 months or a year or more. And so I think that it's certainly not top of mind, although WFP puts out some good numbers. I think they're estimating an additional 100 to 200 million people forced into extreme poverty because of the global context. And it's really not on the radar of most people. Certainly it's not top of headlines here in the US. So in the short term, I'm less optimistic and significantly concerned about what that reality looks like, especially for rural areas that are, you know, dependent on subsistence agriculture. I think it's going to be a very, very, very hard next couple of years, and that's discouraging. On the bright side, I do think there is, you know, with the SDGs, much more focus on education, on global education, on equity for women and girls, on quality education, and I see that as being a really optimistic and important trend. And looking at building capacity of governments and systems change and bringing in technology. So the broad trend, I think I'm really encouraged about. I just think it's going to have some difficult stuff in the immediate near term. So that's where I'm at. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Alice? And you're on mute, Alice.
Yeah, future forward, with optimistic, mainly I focus on the pregnancy girls. Teenage pregnancy is a complex phenomenon requiring multifaceted intervention. Strategies to tackle teenage pregnancy in Uganda should be designed and implemented, putting the adolescent and our needs at the center, while acknowledging the role of the healthcare system, the school system, the community, and of adolescent peer groups, dynamics among them. Create teenage-friendly, dedicated service at village levels and hospitals along the continuum of care, for pre-pregnancy to antenatal visit, to birth and post-natal visit. Design and implement community and family-based approach to address adolescent sexual, reproductive health needs and issues. Identify and train adolescent peer educators and counselors for adolescent counseling on sexual and reproductive health issues and health facilities and in the communities. Create a system in partnership with schools to monitor pregnant teenagers in order to make sure they receive assistance and they are assured education during and after pregnancy. Enrich students' curricula with educational activities on life orientation. Teenage pregnancy, HIV/AIDS, sexually transmitted infections, and family planning. Strengthen operational and impact research to better understand a social and health determinants of teenage pregnancy in impoverished communities, which approach and intervention is effective to prevent and manage teenage pregnancy. So how can we handle pregnancy for early age teenage girls? More counseling the girls. They need mentor for these girls. Let them know that if anybody tried, like, okay, I know rape is different. A young child, 13 years old, 14, of course cannot. And also being also underage, you are 14, 15, it's very easy for men to lie you. So it's really hard. So we need to try to continue talking to these girls, these young girls, to know their body, that this is wrong. If somebody tried to lie you, try to touch you, say no, scream. And reproductive, I know like in the cultural, we African back home, normal, like they don't want to give birth control for young girls, including myself. I have my girls, I have two girls, one just finished college, one is still in college, we don't believe in birth control at the early age, because we say there's side effect for that. So in our culture, it's like, oh, when a girl started using birth control at the early age, she will never give birth. So, when you want to give birth, you're growing up, right? You're like, no, I want to have a child when I grow up, So we need to try now to continue to encourage these young girls to know about their body and know that it's wrong. If any man comes close to you something, try to prove that you're a woman, you're important. Okay, nobody can use your body anyhow. Scream, fight for yourself.
Yes.
So we need to encourage that. We need to work out on that. And as we are trying to work out in our community back home. Yeah.
Yep. Wow. Alice, your words are just, so, yeah, absolutely powerful. Laura, are you hopeful?
I am hopeful. I have to agree that, the immediate future is our present, not let alone our immediate future, is fraught with considerable pain and suffering and difficulties. And we're only just beginning to realize the impact of COVID, which we know has set things back significantly. And so there's a lot that we need to take in and realize, and I don't, certainly in my hopefulness, am not painting a rosy picture or trying to gloss over the current circumstances at all. But I think in addition to the great challenges and difficulties that we're currently presented with as a result of the impact of COVID, that it's also taught us a couple of things that I think will allow us to move forward more quickly, than we have in the past. So for example, one of the things that COVID has taught us is that what impacts one impacts all, right? Mm-hmm. That we are really a human family here. And the more that we can collaborate and connect and share our learning and experience and work together on what we are finding as best practices across countries and cultures, that we can actually build back more quickly. We don't have to all reinvent the wheel or start from ground zero and move forward. And so I see this increased understanding of the need for collaboration, which has been heightened even further by the pandemic, can actually accelerate progress as we learn from our global experiences. And I think organizations like Global Washington, Catalyst 2030, World Bank, everybody that is now really has been, but now even more so, I think we're seeing this opportunity to have conversations like this, to share our experience and learnings, and that as we strengthen this collaboration, that we can move forward more quickly. The other interesting piece about that is that as we share what we're learning, this greater, we can see through these collaborations. And actually we see this in Mona Foundation. It's interesting because Mona Foundation, is connected with the way we operate is by partnering with local grassroots organizations that are working along education and gender equality towards community transformation. And then we support them to continue to further scale and grow their efforts. And so we have maybe a unique opportunity to look across the planet and see in these various locations what the organizations of the grassroots, the challenges they're facing, the practices they're adopting, the successes they're they're having, and can begin to see these patterns emerging, or common indicators, you could call them, that are really, so when we think about how does education promote gender equality, for example, we can look across our partners that are working towards that effort and seeing that actually there are some very common things that, regardless of the country, the culture, that these specific things seem to be promoting and supporting gender equality in educating girls, for example, around the world. So we don't all have to go figure those out, like, maybe these are something we can all, we can share that. Anyway, so this opportunity to really learn together, to draw on the the common indicators that will hopefully surface more and more, the more our collaboration strengthen, does give me actually quite a bit of hope for the future. And I can see that we're moving towards an education that is humanistic, it's holistic, technology driven, and world embracing. So I think it's a road certainly to get there, but I think we can look towards that. And for me, it certainly motivates everything we do day to day, at Mona Foundation, to keep it moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love the optimistic look. We all need that, right? Like, we need optimism. So this concludes my questions, and this is the opportunity for our audience to ask questions. So I see there's a couple questions coming through, but if you can, with the questions, write your name, affiliation, and then who would you like this question to be directed to? But I'll start with what we have, and this is not directed at anyone, but someone had asked, many people talk about giving children education as a human right. Do you think this is the belief in the countries where you work?
I mean, I think what this highlights for me is how rapidly cultures are changing and how much different areas in different countries are changing in terms of attitudes and knowledge and skills and behaviors. And so, in Zambia or other places I work in Southern Africa, or my previous work in Uganda in Gulu, so shout out to my Gulu people there. There's a huge and rapid change of culture coming with social media, access to global information, and there's 100% people who would agree to the core of their body that education is a human right, and they spend their lives working on those issues. And there's a huge group of people who are not particularly aware of that idea nor interested in it, and would be confused at that statement. And in many places that I work in, human rights alone are a contested reality, right? I mean, you can't be talking about abuse of adolescent girls and imagine that you have a culture that recognizes, human rights in kind of a broad and deep practical way that's out there. And so I think that one of the things that this challenges us to think about is, in a much more nuanced way, about the different populations and cultures that we're working in. There's difference between urban and rural, between elite, middle class, and subsistence, between people whose parents are educated and are literate and those whose parents are not literate, between places where children are an important source of household labor and they're vital to the household economy, and education is a luxury, and places where children's education is seen as an economic investment, as something that's going to support the family later on. And so I think we just need to develop this very kind of nuanced view and understanding all the pieces of that patchwork quilt. And what that means is that you don't have cookie cutter solutions, not only within a country, but even within a particular city or a particular district. And you really have to go deep and know the community that you're working in. And to me, that's one of the points of optimism, is that when we do dig deep and we work in those communities, starting from what their values and what their culture is today, and really asking that question and trying to authentically listen and hear, where are we starting from, whether it's relationships between men and women, whether it's the economic reality, then we can really build from there. So for me, it really highlights the need to listen, to be analytical, and to understand what are the true lived values in that community as a place to build from, whether it's education is a human right, or whether it's, yeah, that's a luxury and we can't afford it. You have to understand where you're starting from in order to take the next step forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would, agree with that completely, Shoshon. And I think that's one of the great benefits of working with grassroots-led, organizations, because they embody and are the most familiar with whatever the culture and social context and understandings, the values, the issues of that place. And so to be able to begin a process of education with that understanding is essential, I think, because it varies around the world. But in terms of people thinking whether or not education is a human right, I think it's so telling to see the shift in consciousness that comes about when even one person in a community begins this process of transformation that education brings to us. There's a story of one of our partners in India. So again, this is an area, especially with girls' education. So thinking about education as a girl's right maybe is even, below the general conversation about it as a human right. But so even in that context, we've seen, for example, in this one rural village in India, where again, the girls education is not considered a priority for girls. And that when a girl is given an opportunity, and maybe it's not everybody thinks this way at the beginning, right? But there will be some that are maybe outliers in general that can see in conversation, come to see the importance of education and then send their girls to school or to receive an education. We have a story of one young woman named Callie in this rural village in India who so she's a girl, she was rural, poor, and she also contracted polio when she was a young child. And so also disabled, which really for a girl in India, that's it, that's the end of your life. But through education, she was able to learn to read and write. She was taught how to work as a tailor. She opened her own shops as a seamstress. With the money she earned, she put the children in her family through school and actually became a very well respected woman of the community, and used her experience and resources to then help other women in the community to also gain this experience and education and start their own businesses. A team from Mona went to visit this village a few years later, and as they were walking the streets, this group of men started walking towards them, and it was a little intimidating to see this group of kind of husky guys and not sure what their intentions were. They were very serious. Well, it turns out that one of those men was Callie's father, and he had come to thank Mona Foundation for the opportunity their daughter had received, and which they never would never have considered previously doing that. But now eyes opened, and thus begins the transformation of a community and the other fathers and the brothers to begin seeing the value of women's education. They didn't know their daughters had these capabilities, right? So it begins small, but I think this transformation in social consciousness of education as a human right, as real life examples come to light, the awareness grows and hearts and minds change.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Alice, you're nodding, you're agreeing with everyone.
Yeah, I'm agreeing in a way. Yeah, because with education, if I go back home in Africa, they look at traditionally before, like they believe that boys are the only level to have better education. So for you as a girl, you should just stay home, do the homework things, and when you turn 13, 14, and they marry you. So they believe that it's not important for a girl to have education. So long time, they believe that, not even long time, even like now, they still believe that men should have better education than women. But I'm happy, at least now, both parents can try to put, even if people work in a very rural community, very poor family, they put their kid in school, they pay like $5, for my child. Those remote are, your child go nowhere anyway. You reach like third, fourth grade, you drop out of school, So for education, the way I look at it, yes, well, you can say human rights, yeah, but it depends on the culture.
Right.
It depends on the culture. Yeah, the example, they have very strong culture. They believe, oh, this, But gradually, girls, are coming up. If there's an opportunity where you can put the girls in school, both girls and boys, because like what I'm doing right now, if I go to the remote area, the village, and I know the family, they are very poor, they're not able to put their kid to school, I'm not going to pick only the girls to put in school. I'll pick both of them. And you find that some families have never been in school. As the incident I told you about, the girl who she had a child, she got pregnant at the age of 13 years old, but now the baby is, okay, now it's 6 months. When I was home, 3 months, yeah. So really, she want to do something. So the brother who have never been to school, 2 brothers, that's really young, I put them in school, So it's important for parent or for the guardian to put both children in school, not only boys or not only girls. They're all important.
Yeah.
It's very important for both children to go to school if you are able to put your kid to school. But the challenge is education is very important. But for those who are not able to put their kid in school, they can remain in that local community, the very poor community, the real poverty. If I say poverty, you guys don't know it until you go and look with your eye, and then you say, yeah, what is this? And then I will be sending you like the school which just collapsed. You will see the thing, I need to build it, really this year I need to build that school. It will not take it anywhere, but because of the long walking distance, you're in a very remote area, your home is deep inside, right? Now the school, how many miles from your village there to walk all the way to the other school? And that is why they decide to have that local school in that community, so the kids should not walk that long distance. And the risk for girls too, you walk long distance, they rape you on the incident happen a lot. They rape you on the way. The incident happen a lot. And this is the reality, what is happening. So at least when a school is within close, so the community are there. A kid school is over, you walk, neighborhood, it's okay. You see, so really, yeah, education, to be honest, but children are important to have education.
Yeah.
When you don't put a boy to school, they are the one become a gangster. In the village now, they come and they start robbing you, killing you, right? They're not having any money. They don't have any money. So what do you want them to do? They will sneak at you, you're walking, boom. Like Shoshon has been in Gulu, so he knows a lot about how they call it, the iron thing. Like, boom, you're walking, they hit your back, and they want money from you. So if you can put all these kids, both boys and girls, in school, those things are not going to happen because they're able to work to make money, right? So education, I look, is both important for both children.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. So Sala's asking, Sal from Malaria Partners International is asking, how do you gather input from the communities and teachers you work with, and what have you learned from them? This is an awesome question.
So in our primary school system, which is in Lusaka, we embed our primary schools in faith-based institutions within the communities themselves, so that there's already a level of buy-in and trust from that community with that institution. And the parents are very engaged in the quality of that education because it's really theirs. It's not really ours. We're there to support. We provide books, we do teacher stipends, we train the teachers, but it's really the community's organization and the community's institution. And that's vital for having accountability to the parents for that issue of quality. Whereas if sometimes with a government school, is the teacher even there? Is the teacher there all the time? Have the books been provided? Parents don't feel like they have the same level of power to be able to hold that government institution accountable and say, look, we need these services. So working with a local community institution that already has a deep relationship because it's founded and based in that community really provides us a great way to ensure that there's feedback, that there's communication, that there's ownership, that there's accountability. And as a result, our pass rates are way better. They're in the 95, 98% rate for primary school versus 60, 65% for the government schools, in the very similar neighborhoods. So I think, it's important that you actually set up mechanisms that allow parents to have ownership of the quality of the education at the school and over their children's actual experience within that school. And I think one of the challenges is to do that when you have state-run institutions, because it's such a top-down process that, it's kind of a take it or leave it proposition there. One of the things that's really important for us is that our families are very poor and there's really a lack of adequate food and nutrition for the kids. So one of the great things that we heard from parents is, we love it that you can take the kids during the day because that frees us up to do work and to be able to earn an income. But the big struggle is our kids don't have enough food. So we have a feeding program at our primary schools that just provides one meal a day. It's nutritionally supplemented. And this makes a huge difference, both in the education that the children are able to absorb because they're fed, they can focus and they can think. And it's a huge benefit to the family because their child is getting one solid meal a day. And then, so that in a sense, by cost shifting, it subsidizes the food budget of that very poor family. And it's also a huge incentive to participate and to show up and to go to class and to be in school for the kids. So this is something that was really community driven. It was a community identified need. Yes, it costs money, but it's not break the bank expensive. You're talking about maize meal with some nutritional supplements most of the time, but it has a huge positive impact. And that's the kind of thing that we would not have done if the parents and the community members had not come forward and said, this is a real felt need.
Yep.
In our classroom. And because our teachers come from that community as well, they're not appointed and come from a different district, they're sourced from that community. It really helps all of that feedback and accountability carry on over time.
And actually that goes back to your point about listening, right? Like listening is so important, and that's how you that's where it starts. I'm mindful of the time, so I want to ask a couple more questions. Laura, this question is for you. Technology in education has come a long way. Today, there are foundations, nonprofits, and other agencies teaching young students how to code to develop softwares. It's truly amazing. However, not everyone in the same country and community has the same exposure. How do you suggest achieving equitable access?
All right, well, that's a small question to answer in 3 minutes, 2 minutes, but it's an important question because I think that's really where we're at, right? Is how do we take the beginning of what we're learning and really help to scale it to reach many, 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 many more children? I can share the example of, well, I could say one thing just generally is that in order for organizations, educational initiatives at the grassroots level to be able to employ technology in this way requires an ongoing process of capacity building. So that like you can't just throw computers at people and go, oh, that's going to solve the problem, right? The programs themselves at the grassroots need to have the capacity and have given some consideration and see the need and benefit for this. That said, one example, one of our partners, educational initiatives, is actually looking at the process by which it uses artificial intelligence and a software program that they've developed called MindSpark, and are looking at ways of and considering ways to continually expand and deploy this software program in schools across a variety of settings to support students to learn with understanding, right? So maybe their kids are in school, they're going grade to grade, but they're not actually, their learning level is not improving. And so what they're doing then in partnership with a broad number of organizations, businesses, nonprofits, governments, and so on, are working to provide this software to students in schools so that as part of a lab they're working with this software to baseline their current level of understanding, and then through the MindSpark technology and software, incrementally assisting that student to advance in their learning. And this is something that's they've applied in many settings across India, and now with Mona's support, and also now beginning to try it out in South Africa, to pilot it in South Africa communities. So there's many ways of doing it. We need to look for opportunities to scale educational initiatives as one example. The other piece of it, though, is that it requires collaboration, right? I see this as a great part. This is a partnership of nonprofits, of governments, of businesses, of B Corps, of other foundations, that when a local organization sees the opportunity or is presented with the opportunity, has the ability to take it and can begin to scale. So I think we're going to learn a lot about what that looks like in the coming years.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, Laura. I have another question, and let's see, maybe Alice, you can answer this one. Lois says, when you focus on education, do we consider the homes where these children live in so we can expand the education terminology? Oh, you're on mute.
So you consider the home for the children education, for those vulnerable children, or what is it?
So I think, and maybe Lois, you can clarify the question, but I think how do we expand? This is what I'm understanding from this question, is how do we expand the terminology of education, or do we expand it to consider the homes that children live in? Did I understand that correctly, Lois?
Yeah. I think, yeah, you consider the home the children live in. For example, if like in my organization where the children, we sponsor their education from their community, we put them in boarding school. Mm-hmm. So normally we take them on vacation, we take them back home just to see the guardian or the parent, okay? And then we have a place where they stay with us, okay? And then while they are home with us, we give them tuition, tutoring for those children because they cannot read. Okay, so even if we put them back, and we are having challenge because the kid, we put them in a very good school, is expensive. In boarding school, the school now they're asking us, because like last week I got the email like this second term they're going back. Those who are in the 4th grade, they're going back to 3rd grade because their performance is not really good, because they came from a very poor family. They were not having, let me say, they were not having education. They were in the school, they call that school, but they were not doing anything. So now at that level, you bring that child to go to 4th grade, and they're competing with those kids who came from a very, very powerful background. Okay, there's no way. So, but this school, they know us that we already explained the situation for these children. I'm trying to help them. It's a challenge for this kid, but we are paying extra money. When they're in school, they have to have different teaching level, okay? But they tried, because I was home in January, but when the kid just went back because they were in 2 years lockdown for this pandemic, right? So now when I put them in boarding school now, also a big challenge. They were not having any better education before. Okay, now I decided to put this kid in boarding school. So the challenge now, they are having difficulties. They cannot read. So I was told that, okay, those who are in 4th grade, they go back to 3rd grade. Those who are in 3rd grade, to second grade. Those from second grade to first grade. Okay, so now, so in their community, those kids, is true, the person was talking about, I realized that there is no need for me to put this kid back where they come from. Okay, if I want them to continue with a little bit proper education learning, so they have to be with where they are. Okay, no, we have a place where we put them. We are renting it. I need to build a place, vocational skill, and Sarah, I need to do that. So we are working on it now. That kids, they're having knowledge, they're on vacation, but we are teaching them. So we took them back home to see their guardian, and then the parent, and they sent me the video where they was very touching. This is the grandma. I surprised her because the child, the grandchild parent died of this age, right? And 7 years old. So when I went home, and then I went to a village where that grandma stayed with that child, and then I realized, no, let me just pick this 7 years old, put straight in a boarding school. So I put this girl in a boarding school. So now I'm here. So they sent a video when this child now, they just took her to the grandma. So let her see the grandma, but it's going to come back with where we put the children to continue learning. And then the grandma cried, could not believe that, you know, what I did to change this child's life. The child has got no parent and staying with the grandma. You know, both parents died. So on that grandma, the grandma is even sick, weak, you know. So that is, you can see the situation, the condition where this child is. If this child continues staying in that community, she's not going to go anywhere. Age of 12, 13, having another baby. The grandma died, she's there by herself. So this is a big challenge. So yeah, protect this child, give different environment. You know, let her see that, oh, there's hope, there's light in this world. You know, if they continue staying in that community until we change the level of that community to raise up that, okay, better education, the community can have, I know challenges, it will take time, but God power is there.
Right, and Lois just clarified and said if father is not exposed to the value of a girl's education, they will not support their children's education fully, which is, you know, what the comment or the question was around home. We have and then we have community conversations to hear from individual and share why girls' education is equally as important as the boys' work on community senses, and I think that's very important. And you spoke to that, Alice, like environment, home, etc. And maybe we'll take one more question. Let's see. There's a question from Judith. Is Mind Spark working in Francophone countries? And Laura, you're on mute.
I have to say, I don't know. I'm sorry, Judith.
No worries, no worries.
Majd, I wanted to just follow up briefly on that question about the digital divide. And I'm, you know, as excited about anyone as the power for digital tools to be brought to the classroom, both for quality of education and also just for basic computer literacy and accessibility to knowledge. But I think particularly in Africa, there is a real and meaningful digital divide. About close to 500 million people don't have access to electricity. Rural electrification is, you know, very limited to non-existent. Obviously, the cost of computers is meaningful, and the ability of teachers to use those devices in a way that actually assists with learning may be limited. So on the one hand, on where it's able to happen, I think it's an incredibly powerful tool, and it's really meaningful and a qualitative improvement. But I just think that we need to acknowledge that for many, many rural settings in Africa, that is not going to be available anytime in the immediate future. And, you know, we need to focus on some of the basics of education, like as Alice was saying, is there a building that hasn't collapsed from the monsoon? Is there an actual teacher there? Is there an actual book that follows a curriculum? Are boys and girls both in the classroom? Can you teach basic literacy and numeracy? And so we have this tension, and I alluded to it before, between, you know, kind of pushing the front end forward as fast as you can, and really pushing all the opportunity and achievement you can, and yet still following up on the bottom side to make sure that these minimum standards are really there and able to reach everyone. And I think the rate of change is so dramatic between people who have access to, an urban area, to electricity, whose parents are educated and are really, at par with what's going on globally. You can go to Kenya and you can go to Nairobi and you can have very talented people, or you can go to Kigali, Rwanda, and you can have people that are, at a global level of ability.
Yeah.
And you can go and travel an hour into a rural area and see people who, again, even basic primary school education is a real reach. And so I think there needs to be honesty about this tension. Everything that we're doing to push the ceiling higher and raise the ceiling, means also, but we can't forget about the floor and bringing up the floor behind. And in a world with limited resources, you have to be thoughtful about how you balance those very valid and real opportunities and needs, realizing that you can't do it all. So anyway, thanks for that.
I feel like we can,
perspective.
I love the ceiling and floor analogy and kind of bridging that gap. I think it's so important, and
Yeah.
it's not, I feel like there's not enough time. We're kind of at the end of the program, but I've learned so much, and I feel like I can keep asking you all so many questions, and we can get deeper and deeper into this. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be here and moderate this conversation. I'll kick it over to Kristen to conclude our program.
Great. Thank you, Mej. Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Shoshon. Thank you, Laura. This has been so informative, and also to see the passion that you all bring to your work. It's so evident that it makes me proud that you are all Global Washington members. And I know a lot of the Global Washington members are here in the chat and talking, and it really drives home the point that education is at the intersection of so many other issues that we're all talking about. You can never look at it in isolation in a classroom. We just talked about how the community involvement, the parent involvement, and not just to start the educational process, but in the outcomes, right? And that really shows the long-term outcomes of what we're all hoping. So with that, I want you to be aware that Global Washington will continue this conversation as we're looking at the intersections of all the sustainable development goals, and looking at other issues. You probably have heard this before, but there is no silver bullet to end poverty. But I've also heard if there was one, education would probably be the closest. I mean, the work that you all are doing is amazing. So we also wanted to post in the chat, Joel, my colleague, posted, Global Washington just produced an issue brief around this topic. We also, if you got our newsletter, there's profiles in there and other information. I encourage you to learn more about these organizations and the other Global Washington members in the months to come. So thank you all for spending time with us. Keep in touch with Global Washington, and I hope you continue to do great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Thank you,
See you
Matt.
guys.
Thank Alice.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.